Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest Liverpool.com podcast. I am Kristian Walsh, and with me this week, looking very refreshed and very excited, is Joel Rabinowitz and Dan Morgan. How are we, gentlemen?
Refreshed, excited, looking forward to a new season.
I am as well. I can't believe the NFL's back.
That wasn't what I was referring
to. I'm actually more excited for the NFL return than the Premier League return, which is not a good way to start a podcast about Liverpool Football Club. But I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know why. It's too soon. I haven't watched an NFL game in 9 months. I think I saw Liverpool play a competitive game about 2 weeks ago. I'm out.
Yeah, I'm not refreshed, and I'm not quite certain that I'm excited. I feel this is very James Rodriguez last night. This type of chat. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm good. I'm ready to defend the title, even though Jurgen is adamant we're not to say that. That's the new that's the new sort of buzzword, isn't it? That he's going to be against all season. I think defending the title. He's not keen on it.
Why do you think that is, Joel?
I've been writing something today, kind of quite existential, about why sort of the mood hasn't exactly been one of unbridled joy throughout the summer as you thought it might have been once Liverpool finally won the league, and trying to get to the bottom of why that is. And I think it is that idea that every single season any of us have been through, unless you saw the last league title win, has been defined by trying to win this thing. So now that we're going into one without that kind of familiar reference point, I think it's quite unsettling, and it feels, because they've reached such a high level for 2 seasons in a row now, was almost like a natural kind of worry that they will drop off a little bit, which is quite likely, which doesn't mean they can't win the title again, but it's just, I suppose, once you sort of reach the summit, it's a whole different challenge trying to stay there. And I think Klopp's I think what he's saying is he doesn't want us to see it as a hindrance, almost having this tag of champions. He wants to use it as something positive going forward.
Dan, I don't like saying social media is crazy, because ultimately society is crazy, and social media is a mere sort of reflection of that, because you get good bits and bad bits in every walk of life. And what we were speaking about this in private before between us three, what we also don't want to do is sort of look down our noses at people on social media who are, let's say, worried about transfers, who are potentially slightly hysterical about transfers, who slide into James Pearce's and Paul Ghost's mentions upon every single tweet and sort of demand Thiago news. We don't want to do that. But the social media space around Liverpool at the moment is a little bit crazy. We had what I just mentioned there around the whole Thiago thing and the concern about Liverpool not signing any players. And then you had the excellent thread from Swiss Ramble. If you haven't read it yet, please do. At Swiss Ramble, he's obviously a fantastic social media account. But Andrew Beasley wrote it on Liverpool.com as well. He sort of deciphered it and broke it down. But basically, he was sort of explaining by the accounts, this is why Liverpool aren't, spending too much money this summer. Now, we're not going to sort of go into that sort of detail because we're not, financial experts. But from more of a, sort of a social media point of view, from a personal point of view, Dan, as Joel sort of alluded to there, it's a bit of a strange space at the moment. I mean, is it surprising you that there's so much vitriol, so much panic, so much negativity almost? And we know that some voices will be amplified and negativity is amplified, but it does feel like it's just a little bit toxic at the moment.
Yes and no, really. I think there's a dangerous precedent here that we need to sort of take out the room straight away, which is that, one of these people who could be, one of the biggest voices on social media right now, banging the drum for Thiago or FSG out or whatever, could be the guy that sits next to you at the game. And I think that there's this precedent that only a certain type of Liverpool fan acts a certain way. Everybody's entitled to want Liverpool to sign players or not. Everybody's entitled to define their joy of football by transfers if that's what they so wish. Whatever people need to get out of this, there's no rule book in how to support. There are the obvious sort of moral guidelines, I would say, that Liverpool Football Club especially looks to adhere to. But if you think that Liverpool signing Thiago and 2 or 3 others this summer is going to define the next 5 to 10 years of the club, then you're well within your rights to do that, and you might be proven right. That's the thing that needs to come to the fore. I mean, for me, I think there's a lot of what Joel was referencing, a lot of sort of existential anxiety knocking around the place that's come from actually winning the league. And I think it's almost easier to sometimes be in a place where, you're Man United and you finish 33 points off the champions and the only way is up, because then you can sort of see it as an adventure and a thing that the only way we can do this is if we get better, and God, what a laugh that'll be if we manage it. We're in uncharted territory because that's all we've done for 30 years, and now we're at the other end of that spectrum where it's how do we maintain, how do we stay on top, how do we do that if we're not necessarily bringing in new players. And I think the other thing as well is, I don't think it's been talked about enough, that Liverpool went so long with such a big cushion of points at the top of the Premier League that I think a lot of people, myself included, probably got a bit used to it. And to all of a sudden now start again from zero.
Pedal doesn't exist, does it?
No, it doesn't.
We haven't had pedal in a long time.
But it's such a fall from grace to go from like 25 plus points for what feels like an eternity to everyone starts again at none. And then compound that with all of these players coming into the league and into different sides, Kai Havertz, Timo Werner, Donny van de Beek, all the big names coming into the Premier League. There is an undeniable sense of dread and threat. And I think that we sort of, the only thing I would sort of issue out as a word of warning would be to not come to expect anything. I think it's very dangerous in football to expect or to be entitled by anything. Football is the game we love in many senses because everyone starts again at zero every August. You're not telling me there won't be Everton fans or Sheffield United fans or whoever, if they win, 3 out of the first 3 games, going, oh, hang on. You never know. Because we've done it. We've done it with teams that we thought were nowhere near it. 13-14, I remember coming out to the ground against Stoke at home on the first day and just feeling something. Just thinking there's something here. And that is the beauty of football. That is the beauty of football seasons, if you like. So, yeah, I wouldn't sort of have any entitlement as far as Liverpool is concerned, even though they have won the league in such a manner last season.
I'll repeat what I said a couple of episodes ago, and I think it got me called an egg on social media, and certainly on our YouTube comments, which is why I've got a cap on today. But I wouldn't be surprised if this season is a little bit strange in the sense of, I'm not saying we'll definitely get a Leicester 2016 or anything like that, but I think there's an opportunity because there's so many games. I know there was a bit of disagreements because, there's squad depth isn't there for some of these teams, and I'm not saying Crystal Palace are going to finish second or anything like that. I just think there's an opportunity where there's going to be a team from outside the pack who deals with this situation better than other teams, and therefore we'll box it off. So that's where I'm at with that, basically. So, yeah, put your money on West Ham to win the Premier League, because you imagine that. But yeah, what we're going to do today then to kind of move smoothly into that is talk about our sort of predictions for the season, our headlines of the season. Basically, we're going to try and predict the headlines of the season, where it comes from Liverpool's perspective, and maybe just a few others from the Premier League in general, maybe even Europe if we want to. Joel, I'll start with you. What are the sorts of what can you see happening this season around Liverpool?
At the moment, my biggest excitement, I suppose, building on sort of glimpses you've seen from pre-season, but also what we thought we were getting originally is the Minamino conversation. I think given that Liverpool so far have only bought a left back, and they may or may not sign one or two more before the window closes, but I think if you're looking at how Liverpool's squad or team can be better than it was, or different, I suppose, than it was last year, he is the one, because you forget, because of the way time and the calendar's been warped so much, Minamino has been a Liverpool player for quite a long time now. It's been quite a few months, and I know 3 of those months was when there was no football getting played, but he's been here a while and he's gone through this process that we've seen other players go through, Robertson, Fabinho, Oxlade-Chamberlain. And I think the kind of question that everyone's been asking ever since we signed him was, where does he fit in? Where are we going to use him? And I think we're starting to see a little bit more clarity. Again, there's always the caveat with pre-season that you don't want to draw big conclusions and everything, but I think there was enough there in the second half of the Community Shields and the Blackpool game, which again, I know there was players missing for international duty, but it was still interesting to see him used kind of behind or supplementing the front three in more of a 4-man attack, and then Klopp going with a 2-man midfield, which we've not really seen a lot of since kind of the opening months of 2018-19. And I don't think that's something we'll see in every game. I don't think we're going to permanently ditch the 4-3-3 system, especially in the big games against the strongest teams. I don't think we're going to go to Stamford Bridge in the second game and play a 4-2-3-1. I might be wrong, but I think against these teams that come to Anfield and look to defend and stay compact and deep, I think having those 4 attackers with him, he causes chaos because the positions he takes up are so difficult for defenders to kind of identify. The way he's been sort of switching with Firmino, I think it was Dan wrote a piece a while back about sort of the difficulty of fitting Minamino and Firmino together, and I think you've seen a few signs recently that could actually work, because they both have that tendency to break forward like a number 9, but then drop back like a number 10. And yeah, I'm just really excited. I think he looks more in sync with the system. I think he looks more sure of himself. And yeah, to be honest, I'd love to see him start against Leeds on the opening day. I'm not quite sure Klopp will go with that. But I think just as an option to have, I think he brings so many possibilities.
Is this the year of Taki, Sam?
I'm intrigued in terms of how we sort of... I'd love to know how we get him in the team for a run of 10 games. I understand where he comes in isolation, but if the manager sort of says, okay, I've got a run of 10 games here and I want Taki to hopefully start every one, I'm intrigued to see what the team looks like, because I mean just sort of rolling with that point, one of my predictions is that this could be Roberto Firmino's best season in a Liverpool shirt. Output, goals, I think there's enough evidence from pre-season and enough evidence from the past 3 that he can be a player who really comes to the fore and adds those goals that we're missing at home to his game this season. And I think, like I say, I think they will look to, when we look at evolution in this side, I think they will look to evolve Firmino's game, and maybe that's the concept of him sort of dropping back a little bit deeper, creating from a little bit deeper, but also then I've got this vision of Firmino almost being a little bit sort of Lampard 06 to 10 in terms of sort of third man run, arriving late into the box on the end of things, almost like a centre midfielder, 8/10 type player. And I back him to get 20 plus goals in the Premier League this season. That's a big statement, but I just think he's gonna pop for some reason. I don't know why. I can't really put any kind of logic behind that. Where that then leaves Takumi Minamino, I'm not sure. I think he has sort of one thing that looks like it's clicked to me is the concept of starting wide and drifting inside and drifting into more central areas. I think when he was starting wide at times last season, he looked a bit sort of confused by the brief. He was sort of crossing over runs with other forwards, and he didn't really look to have the confidence to sort of play across the line in the way in which Sadio Mane does or Mo Salah does, for example. So whether there is the case to accommodate both in the same team. I know people have moved to 4-2-3-1, but if you do that, then you're still playing Firmino in the 10. So yeah, it could be the year of the Taki, but it's the year of the Bobby for me, Chris.
I also love the fact that you said you're a bit confused by the brief. I think that's your sort of just general vibe with me, isn't it? When I'm sort of throwing a few ideas out there of a morning conference. Just
I hope Taki is off the same approach as me. Let's just give this a couple of minutes, and it'll all make sense in the end.
Let's just get it done and finish. I think Minamino's an interesting one. I think with Firmino as well, I think they'll almost kind of dovetail in that sense. Not necessarily on the pitch, but I think if Firmino isn't having a good season, I think you'll see Taki Minamino having a really good season because I think he'll be playing more. I think if Firmino's having a very good season, then it is hard to see where Minamino maybe fits in. I can see Minamino having a Benayoun 08-09, Shaqiri 18-19 kind of season, which, given that he's 24 years of age, he's still ultimately learning the ropes at Liverpool, came from Salzburg, cost around 7 million. I think that's absolutely fine. I think you don't need an absolute superstar to come off the bench to win titles. And Liverpool know that better than anyone because they did it with Divock Origi for the second half of 18-19, nearly won the league and obviously won the Champions League. So I think you're looking at him in a Benayoun sort of role in 08-09. I think he probably gets about 10 goals this season. It's still, it is a good campaign, from the bench, a couple of starts as well. With Firmino as well, I'm just interested in if you're feeling around that, Dan, is ultimately, his underlying numbers. He massively underperformed last season, and anyone who's into that idea of XG and sort of shot conversion and that kind of thing will know that Firmino should have scored. He should have had a 15-goal season, really. And he should have scored about 8 goals at Anfield and ultimately only scored 1. So, there's definitely, I said on the last podcast, I think that I was concerned this could be sort of the start of the end of Firmino to a degree, and that he'd have to sort of show something a little bit more this season. I'm absolutely on board with the idea that he will do that, and he'll sort of have the campaign you were talking about, Dan. One thing I wanted to raise in a headline, I think we might see the you can choose one of two here. It's either no Gomez or Joe Gomez. In terms of, it's not very SEO friendly, that is it. But we will sort of. I'm a little bit concerned, not the word around Gomez, but I think Liverpool have probably got the best 2B/third choice central defender in the Premier League in Joel Matip. I think it's really easy to sleep on Matip, but I think if you look at the body of work of Matip and Gomez over the past 2 seasons, let's say, and I know that's probably unfair on Gomez because he obviously had that injury against Burnley. If you look at the body of work between Matip and Gomez over the past 2 seasons, I think Matip slightly edges him out. And I think because Gomez is younger and he looks a little bit better on the ball, he looks a little bit calmer, a little bit cooler, and because he's obviously got a lot more potential, I think sometimes we could sort of just assume, Gomez streets ahead of Matip. I actually think, and post restart, and even from what I've seen a little bit in pre-season, even a little bit of what he did for England against Iceland in the last minute last weekend, I can see a situation where, again, Gomez may have to be brought out to the firing line slightly, and Matip's there to step it up. What do you reckon, Joel? Is this going to be it's obviously maybe more complicated by the fact Liverpool don't really have a fourth choice centre back at the moment. So where do you stand on that? Do you feel we see more minutes for Matip, more minutes for Gomez? I suppose with the caveats, let's say they're both fit for the entirety of the campaign, which is a problem for Matip, definitely, maybe even for Gomez. Who do you see getting more minutes, and who do you think should be getting more minutes?
I'm still fully on board with Gomez as the default partner for Van Dijk. I think I don't have too many worries about him long term. I think we can easily forget how young. I think he's only 22, or if not 23 still. It's just because he's been around for so long and performing in such a kind of a high profile position for Liverpool that we assume he's kind of got a few more years than he actually has. And again, I've made this point previously, but Van Dijk wasn't doing anything that Gomez was doing at this age. Like, he's a very early developer to be performing at the level he is. So I think we still have to give him some sort of leeway with those mistakes. I think they've become less frequent the more he's kind of got into his stride as a Liverpool player. They're still going to happen from time to time, but I do wonder this season whether, again, we often reference the nature of the fixture schedule, and there's going to have to be some rotation, especially given Liverpool's kind of quite delicate situation at centre-back, really. He's not going to be able to play Van Dijk and Gomez repeatedly in Europe and in the domestic cups and in the Premier League. So I think there'll be hopefully more of Matip than we saw last season. Obviously, he barely featured, and fitness is the big question there. I think there's also, if you presume that both are fit, there might be a scenario where there's certain games where he just wants to pick Matip, because Matip's a funny one. Aesthetically, doesn't often look that good on the ball because he's quite gangly and he can look a little bit shaky at times. But actually, his progressive passing, and sometimes when he does those slaloming runs, where he takes 3 or 4 players out of the game and sort of, he can essentially go for the edge of Liverpool's own box to kind of starting an attack in the opposite half. I think he can be really useful, especially in sort of breaking down the lower sides in the league. So, yeah, I think you're right in saying he's been slept on a little bit. I think in terms of starts, Matip was must have been about 12 or 13 last season in total. It was a really small amount of minutes. So, again, he's not as old as you would expect Matip. I think he's only 27, 20.
He's younger than Van Dijk.
Well, yeah, that feels mad to say as well. But I think you're right in terms of third choice centre-backs in the league. He's just about as good as there is. So, yeah, I'm hoping to see more of him, but I'm still very optimistic about Gomez's prospects.
Promisingly as well around Matip, it looks like his head isn't shaped like a 50p this season, judging by his header. Because let's face it, and people said this about Van Dijk in his first season, Matip should get more goals from corners. He finds space really well, and he obviously scores one against Arsenal early on. I'm struggling to think of many Matip goals. I think he scores at Selhurst Park in his first season.
West Ham away as well.
Yeah, West Ham away. He does well. He finds space well. It's just that it seems to just spin off his head most of the time. So interested to see if that can sort of develop as well. I think he might have scored against Southampton as well in 18-19. Dan, where do you sort of see the centre-back situation?
I think quietly, I share your Gomez concern a little bit, Chris, to be honest, in the sense of, I think it's easier for teams to screen Gomez and sort of funnel him to making passes that I'm not always comfortable. He makes. There's one in pre-season. I've just wrote a piece today on Firmino, and the friendly against Salzburg. I had earmarked as Firmino's fault all day for the first goal from Patson Daka. But when you look at the goal back, it's a pass that Joe Gomez shouldn't be making. He's basically getting screened by 2 strikers who want him to funnel the ball into Firmino, and when they do, it's a trap. They've set the trap, and he just takes a touch too many, and all of a sudden they're in. And I think Matip's quietly better in terms of not exactly even his range of passing, or especially not his aesthetics at times, but just his choice of ball, I think is quietly better than Gomez. And I agree with Joel's point, to be honest, in contrast, that given his age, there are things that are still being ironed out. Let's not forget, 2 seasons ago, we were all worried about sort of Gomez being sucked into the near post, or balls being played over his head that were seemingly just dropping on all the time, and he's undoubtedly sorted that element of his game out. I just think when we talk about these fine margins and these little details, I think quietly that's where the coaching staff might favour Matip. And one thing that sticks in my mind is the first game back against Everton after lockdown, Matip starts.
It's really forgotten that, isn't it?
It's really forgotten, yeah. Really slept
on.
As
the left back.
Yeah. And I think that's really, really interesting in the concept that they've had all that time together, and it's almost to start again from new. And it's Matip who gets the nod. Because there was no injury concerns from anyone who lined up in the squad that day. So I wonder whether that might be a thing going forward.
Is that potentially a Calvert-Lewin thing? Because
Potentially, yeah.
Gomez gets beaten in the air and Matip is better in the air than the Gomez. I think that's pretty much undeniable. So it could be a Calvert-Lewin thing.
Potentially, yeah, but it's just something to keep an eye on. It's something I've noticed in terms of how teams set up against us. You know, the party line is always people target the right-hand side with Trent and stuff like that. I think at times there's more cute ways in which to target this Liverpool team, and I think one of them's sort of funneling Joe Gomez into making passes that the opposition want him to make, and I think he's still a little bit guilty of doing that. But still a great, unbelievably highly potential young defender. So yeah, it wouldn't worry me if he was in the side with Van Dijk, put it that way.
We'll move on. We'll go back to this at the very end because I want to sort of get you really quick predictions around Liverpool, the campaign and everything. Just want to throw one more headline in there. Obviously, I've got my newspaper background and I do think we will see a lot of woe Salah this season. I think he's going to score a hell of a lot of goals. I think he'll be top goal scorer. But we'll talk about that in a little bit in terms of predictions. Folded into this is obviously spoken about Minamino, about Firmino. I've just, cheaply thrown in Salah there as a segue. Rhian Brewster. So we're moving on to just a really quick segment. Obviously, every week we ask you to take part in our polls. I accidentally didn't set the poll last week, so please ignore everything I mentioned about the poll last week. I think it was meant to be how many points are Liverpool going to get in the first 3 games. Let's just say, given how everyone's reacting on social media, that 0 was the answer. So we'll forget about that one. We're going to set a poll this week, and it's about Rhian Brewster because reports, Joel, are suggesting that he might be on his way out of Liverpool permanently. There's been a couple of reports from various outlets. He might be out on his way permanently, and the reason they're doing this is because they'll put a sell-on clause in his sale, and therefore can sort of bring him back. I mean, this makes no sense, surely.
No, I don't think so. I think when you've invested that much in a player of his kind of ability and potential, to not even really give him the kind of the time of day to prove that he can be a part of his squad would be a massive shame. I'm yet to be fully convinced that he's a long-term Liverpool player. I think he's got loads of talent. Again, questions around kind of style of play. Liverpool for so long now have played without really an orthodox number 9. And all the talk at the moment, or in recent months, has been, can Minamino sort of do the Firmino role and be that kind of backup option there that we've all been waiting for so long. Brewster, you look at his goals at Swansea, his record is fantastic. It was basically 1 and 2 there. But he is much more of an on-the-shoulder number 9. He runs in behind. He's a very clinical finisher in the box. There's definitely a case Liverpool could do with something that's a bit different that isn't Divock Origi this season. But I think the idea of cashing in on him now, even with a buyback clause, just seems very premature to me. But remember, this is a guy who also lost a huge amount of his kind of younger days through injury and has had to come back from that. And he seems very well liked, very integrated within the squad. I think it's a bit of a shame what happened in the Community Shield. I think the way that sort of what is essentially a few inches kind of changes the narrative quite a lot. I think if he scores that penalty and Liverpool win the Community Shield, and you can talk about the importance of that game or not, but for a young player like that to score a winning penalty, I think there'd be a lot more optimism about him, and I don't think there'd really be much of a discussion. And then obviously the way that happens, he was obviously gutted with it. That is kind of a shame how that's unfolded. So I would be sad to see him go out this season. I'd like to at least see how he copes in the first few months. Again, Liverpool going to have a lot of games. He'll get minutes off the bench, hopefully in the domestic cups, and then probably reassess things from January. I think if it comes to a point then, like last season, where he needs to go out and play for a Premier League club, then so be it. But I think, yeah, I'd be more inclined to loan him if they are thinking of kind of getting more experience than selling him at this point. I wouldn't be considering doing that.
Dan, Liverpool are renowned for their use of youngsters and the way they nurture them through. Klopp is obviously a massive advocate of that sort of thing. You look at his Dortmund team, you look at what he's done with Trent, with Gomez, several other players as well. On the quiet though, have have Liverpool messed up this Brewster situation a little bit?
It certainly doesn't make sense. The more and more I come to think of it, I don't think he's rated for some reason within the current coaching staff. I think they see something that they don't like. And we can talk a lot about sort of how sort of inefficient the club is with transfers, etc. But I think that's been the case for the last 3 years. And I think, when we want to talk about whether this club are ruthless enough in the transfer market, that they did their utmost to get Rhian Brewster to sign a contract to ensure he didn't leave on a free, and now they're looking at 20 to 25 million, and he's still 20 years of age. That being said, I agree with Joel. I don't think it makes sense to do it now unless we are absolutely desperate to, for example, sign Thiago and keep Wijnaldum.
I was just about to say, is Brewster Liverpool's most sellable asset of this summer?
Possibly, yeah. But again, this sort of Chelsea had a really good example of sort of how you deal with saleable assets in terms of your own spending. Chelsea have put up a lot of money up front for their own signings, but they know that they will eventually recoup a huge amount of that money through the saleable assets they've got. Liverpool don't have that many. But I think if this was a case of getting Thiago in and doing what they need to do to make that an eventuality, then I think there's got to be an argument that they can sort of roll that dice a little bit and say, well, if Brewster goes to the Premier League on loan this season, then there's every chance his value doubles from 20 to 40 because there's a dearth of strikers as well. And for the sake of 1 year, and I get the financial implications, I really do have wrote about it, but for the sake of 1 year, that might be a risk worth taking as opposed to a Marco Grujic or a Harry Wilson. I don't know. There's the sort of willingness to let him go tells me something isn't right in terms of his suitability to this team and its style or whatever. But I think in a year's time, whether we insert a buyback clause or not, or a sell-on clause or whatever, I think there's every chance we're all looking at this with and the club especially with a bit of egg on the face of we should have just held out another year here. Even if he's not our player, even if he's not going to be our player, we should have held on to him on the books for another year.
So regular listeners / viewers of Liverpool.com podcast, by now you know what to do. It'll be in the description of the podcast or the YouTube video. Take part in the poll. The options are A, keep him because he's an important squad member. B, keep him because we want to see more of him before making a decision. C, loan him out to a Premier League club. D, loan him out to a Championship club. E, loan him out to a club overseas. F, sell him with no buyback clause. And G, that's the thing about the alphabet then. G, sell him with a sizable buyback clause. Which one would you be going for, lads? What would you be saying? Personally, I would say keep him because I think we want to see more of him before making a decision.
I'd agree with that. Option B for me.
Yeah, I think that. I think let him go on loan to the Premier League and assess in a year's time. Like I say, you never know. His valuation might be doubled.
I'd also throw in the Salzburg curveball, by the way. Just send him to Salzburg, play a bit of Champions League football, get him in a team that dominates in a setup that Liverpool sort of would be familiar with a manager who plays a similar sort of games to Klopp. If I was sending him anywhere, I might be tempted to send him to Salzburg just to get used to playing against teams who are going to sit back for 90 minutes. But yeah, an interesting one, and I also believe by the time you listen to this, it may have been moved on, it may have been knocked down. We'll have to see. But I think the very fact that nobody is kind of dismissing this out of hand that Liverpool will be selling Rhian Brewster, it probably points to the fact that there isn't something quite right with the situation, and it's a strange one for all parties concerned. So just finally, before we move on to really quick hits in terms of pre-season predictions, football is back, not just the NFL, but the Premier League. Liverpool are back. And it begins all over again on Saturday afternoon, Saturday early evening, when they welcome Marcelo Bielsa's Leeds. Joel, what are you sort of looking forward to here? What are you expecting? Are you concerned? Is this the hardest game Liverpool could have? Just give us all of your thoughts.
The only thing that makes me slightly trepidatious about it is the two fixtures that
What a word!
Well, yeah, I put it in a piece.
Trepidatious?
Yeah, apprehensive, tense. Is the context of what comes after, because they go straight to Stamford Bridge, and then it's Arsenal, who've obviously beaten Liverpool recently and then beaten them on penalties again in recent months. So those two games, the second and third of the season, are really tough, which basically means that the first one is an absolute must win. And you can imagine if the mood is slightly negative at the moment online, then if they don't beat Leeds at Anfield on the opening day as champions, you can imagine how it goes. That said, I am pretty confident. I have to say, I haven't seen loads of Leeds, but from everything you read, they're not a team that's just going to come and sit back and kind of wait for Liverpool to attack them. They are going to be quite proactive in their sort of pressing game. So I think someone like Fabinho is a player that I'm marginally concerned by, just because we know he can be a bit of a slow starter in seasons. It takes a while to sort of get into his groove. And I think if there's one that they're sort of looking to target in terms of disrupting Liverpool's system, he is one. All that said, and again, I know it was Blackpool, but it was reassuring to see Liverpool score 7 goals, different goal scorers in their last pre-season game. And I think in terms of team selection, I don't think we'll see too many surprises. I've sort of, in my head, had that he'll probably go with the standard goalkeeper and back four, the front three, and then obviously midfield. I would, if I was to guess right now, and I'd be interested to see what you guys think, but I think he'll probably go with Fabinho, Keita, and one of Milner or Wijnaldum. As much as I'd like to see Curtis Jones or Minamino get a start, I think they're more likely to come off the bench. But yeah, I'm confident, as with last season, Liverpool will kind of overcome the challenge and get the 3 points.
Dan, it's difficult because of the Bielsa factor, isn't it? Because if anybody, I'd bite your hand off here to have Chelsea at home or West Ham at home, obviously, but a manager who's not necessarily going to been planning for the past 3-4 weeks about this game and how to nullify Liverpool. The Bielsa factor is a big factor here, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. David Hughes wrote a really good piece for our site about sort of how Leeds might approach it, similar to what Joe was saying. Pressure on the ball, and I think we're going to see a big element of that playing out in the game. And I think the other thing to reference, Chris, as well, which is going to influence the game, is the fact that it's going to be an empty stadium again, and it's the easiest thing to forget now with everything that's happening around transfers and stuff, but it's still, for me, the most important. And if we have 50,000 of us inside Anfield on Saturday, then I would say the intensity would just be too much for Leeds. But if they're allowed to have sort of, and I think they will have, by the way, sort of 10 minutes in the game at some point where they look really impressive and on top, then I think it's going to be a lot more sort of twitchier than if there was those supporters in the ground, oddly enough. I think Bielsa will have been planning for Liverpool for about 3 years, to be honest. I think that he's obviously somebody who backs himself massively. And
it's a big coming out party as well, isn't it?
Of course,
in the Premier League.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, and it's sort of him announcing himself, like you say. But it's a good test for me. I expect Liverpool to win. I expect Liverpool to get sort of their most technical players on the pitch, if you like. I agree with Joel that I think Naby Keita will play with, I think probably Milner and Fabinho, but I'd expect Curtis Jones to be on the pitch from 65 onwards for that very reason. I think the front three might just have too much for Leeds' back line in terms of just their nous and their ability to move them in places that they don't want. My only concern is that I think there are two players that I would have liked in mind for this game, Ox and Henderson, and neither of them are going to be about by the looks of it. So, yeah, that's it's a slight concern, but again, just looking back to the transfer existential crisis that we're going through, this squad is bigger than we realise, and it's deeper and stronger than we realise at times. So I think we've got enough for Leeds United, and if I haven't, you can clip this and send it around the internet at 9 o'clock on Saturday night.
You'll be on matchandontogether.com or whatever it's called. And you talk about the squad depth there, Dan. For me, neither of you have mentioned the most important player for me in that midfield, and it'll be Gini Wijnaldum. And again, this is one of these really strange situations where he might even be a Liverpool player by the time they play against Leeds. Will Klopp sort of want to play a player who is potentially on his way out. We still don't know what's going on with Barcelona. I mean, look, Klopp's never had an issue with that. He pretty much half of Dortmund's team that played Bayern in the Champions League final we're heading over to Bavaria the day after. That's not an issue for Klopp, but it'll just be interesting to see his selection, because I agree. I'd be a bit concerned about Milner. First game of the season, no intensity to draw upon in the crowd. But maybe you need that sort of...
I think he's been fantastic. I think he's been brilliant pre-season. Sorry, Chris. I think he's been excellent pre-season. I think he's at times set the intensity. Second half against Salzburg comes to mind, where he just decides it's not good enough, comes on the pitch and really sets it. And that's where I'd sort of be, given the Leeds factor as well, I'd be tempted to get him in there for that reason. Because I think he'd be dying to play in the game. That's the other thing.
Sorry, go on, Sam.
No, I was going to say, I wonder sort of whether that's the ideal Wijnaldum from the bench arguments. Forget out all the Barcelona context. Just the fact that Milner's, I think there'll be a priority or a preference to get as many players who stuck at Melwood throughout the past week or two on the pitch as possible, rather than have a player who's come back sort of Thursday night with no briefing him about sort of what Liverpool are going to be facing, and only the Friday to be judged. So I'd be looking at Milner, to be honest, Milner for being on Keita, because they've been there throughout the international break, so they've got all the information they need, I'd imagine, on the opponents.
I think that's the fair point. To jump in, Chris, the one thing I would say with that is I would be a bit disappointed if he went with the Community Shield midfield, which was Milner and Wijnaldum in front of Fabinho. I think it was. I just think, as much as possible, I think Liverpool need to have one of those sort of more forward-thinking, creative midfielders on the pitch when they can this season. And I think the way Keita and Jones have been playing throughout pre-season and even in the tail end of last season, I think just in terms of the balance with teams trying to stifle Liverpool's fullbacks as much as they do, I think you do need a little bit more going through the middle. So, yeah, I think that Keita would definitely be on my first team sheet for sure.
I should know this, but are we back to 3 subs? But are we back to 7 on the bench, or is it still 9?
I presume it would be 7. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's got to be 7 if there's only 3 subs. I would imagine. So Liverpool will have a stronger bench than Leeds. I think that's also. I think that the interesting thing from a Liverpool perspective, when looking at Leeds, is they've signed that Rodrigo for a big fee. So I always worry about playing new signings on opening days. Call it the Ravanelli factor. But both of you lads going for a home win. Yeah, I think Liverpool will win. Might be a bit more twitchy than we think, but I think
2-2, 3-2 Liverpool.
Yeah, I think 2-1.
They might go 1-0 down. That's the only slight inkling I have, based on not very much, but I think they'll get the job done.
Should we just get beat at the first game, get the home league record out the way, get rid of that? We can start again.
Yeah, just finish it now before Everton or Man City or Man United take it. That's pretty much it. Right, okay, so before we finish, just really quick fire. Feel free to give a quick sentence or two about why, but let's just go through our pre-season predictions. Who's going to win the league?
Liverpool.
Ultimately, it should be Liverpool, but I think it might be Man City. Top goal scorer?
Salah again.
Aubameyang.
Timo Werner, and heads fall off, but he might be in contention with Salah.
I think you're talking about purely Liverpool there, Chris.
No. You can go anywhere.
Nah, I'll stick with Mo.
Stick with Salah. I fancy Salah to have a bit of a crazy one. Champions League winners.
Ooh. See, this is very dependent on format, isn't it? If it is very traditional, 2 legs.
I think Bayern again, by the way.
We don't know the groups yet as well, do we?
I was tempted to go Bayern again.
Yeah, in terms of likelihood, I would say then with us a close second.
How many goals do we see Salah, Mane, and Firmino scoring, roughly?
I'm going to say all comps, Salah's going to get 25 plus. I think he was 23 last season.
I thought you were going to go 40 there, Joel. I thought you were going to go absolutely massive there on 40.
No, I think he's settled these last couple of seasons on like 25 roughly as a par. It was 27 the season before last, 23 last season. So I think, 25 for him. Mane again seems to have settled on 20 in all comps as his number. I think the interesting one, Dan's alluded to it earlier, is Firmino. Needs to be getting closer to that 20 mark, and people forget it was only a couple of seasons ago when he was getting 27. It's just that Salah got 44, so no one really talks about it. But I think Firmino can get to 20 in all competitions.
I'm going 20, 35 for Salah.
I'll go in the Premier League only. I'll go 58 combined, and I think that'll be enough. I think that'll be the reason why Liverpool will retain the league.
Guardiola, is he there on the last day of the season?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Carlo Ancelotti, is he there on the last day of the season?
No. Not
Yes.
for me.
I would say so.
You reckon so? What else can we go for? I haven't even. I'm just doing these off the top of my head.
I'll throw one in because I'm interested in this. How many points wins the Premier League? Because I have a theory that 90 wins it. And I think if 90 is the case, then Liverpool can afford 3 losses on top of what they got last season, which was 3, which is interesting. But I think it's massively sort of, and take expected points, goals, wherever you want. But Liverpool's expected points for last season was 74.28. They overperformed by 24.72 points, which take that where you want. But if there is sort of a reverting to mean to be done on the expected points scale, then I think 90 wins it, and I'd probably take 90 now.
I think it's high 80s, low 90s. That's what I've been working on when I'm looking at seasonal handicaps in terms of betting and whatnot. I've been going low 90s, high 80s.
Yeah, I'd back that as well. I think the one thing I would add to that is I don't think you'll be getting Chelsea and Man United on mid-60s. There's no chance of that. I think they'll be sort of pushing mid-70s, if not low 80s next season, or at least they should be, given their squads.
Last one from me. Biggest flop of the season, transfer-wise.
I was just about to go for that.
Go on.
Thiago Silva.
Thiago Silva, that's a good shout. I really like that.
I have a feeling one of the big Chelsea signings, and I can't quite pinpoint which one, might sort of fall a little bit short. I'm talking not about Chilwell and Thiago Silva, but one of the attacking ones.
One of them was Shevchenko, basically.
Whether it's Werner, Havertz, or Ziyech, I think. Yeah, I have a feeling that 2 of them will kind of hit the ground running and do really well, and one might sort of be a little bit of a disappointment.
I'm gonna go for your man James.
James, you're not having a eye at all.
Don't think he fancies it at all.
We'll run through really quickly then. Sort of the biggest overachievers in the Premier League.
Southampton.
I'm going I think Southampton finished 7th or 8th. And I'll throw Brighton in there as well, top half.
This might come back to bite me, but I have a feeling West Ham might be slightly better than people realise.
He's going for the Moisés. Biggest underachievers.
I'll go up. Tottenham.
I was going to say Tottenham. I think they're going to have another.
Saying Tottenham.
Yeah.
I think based on what they done last season, I think Leicester. I think that I don't think they get anywhere near what they done last season.
I think you might see Sheffield United drop a little bit like a stone, to be fair. I think they might be in a bit of trouble doing it second time round. Final two then. Will Liverpool lose at Anfield in the league this season?
Yes.
To
and
who?
it'll all be fine.
Yeah.
Leeds United.
I'd be amazed if not.
Yeah, do you know what? It'll probably be the first game when fans are back. Sheffield United, there we go. That's the first game. Actually, two more then. As I said, two more. Next one. Will Everton beat Liverpool this season?
No.
I'll go with it. James Rodriguez, 35 yards.
Run straight to my flat from whichever ground you're in.
And finally, will the city of Liverpool and predominantly Liverpool Football Club host any sort of parade by the time the start of the 2021-22 season begins?
No. As much as I'd love to say yes.
Is that because they're not going to win anything, Joel, or is that because of, the whole Corona thing?
More of a latter, I'm thinking. It's just
you're backing the Reds, but you're just not backing the vaccine, basically.
Yeah, it's hard to have too much sort of optimism about that sort of thing at the moment.
I'm torn because I think yes in terms of logistics, but I think if we get to the end of next season and Liverpool haven't won the league, then it's going to look really daft if they do it then.
Klopp was promised we will have a parade, but I don't see now. It's gone. I don't see how you do have a parade.
No, I'd do it, Chris. I would do it up until the point in which Liverpool can't win it again, or unless it's very certain that Liverpool can't win it again. If they say they want to do it at a game, for example, if everyone's back in March or April, and Liverpool are 20 points behind Man City, then it's not. It's going to be West Brom at the Kop times a million. Just don't do it. It's got to be done, you would imagine, probably before New Year, with a lot of good grace and a lot of sort of positivity. But yeah, I'd like to do it, but I don't know whether it could or not.
As long as Everton's for James Rodriguez goes without a blip, we'll be absolutely fine.
Let's not be those guys. Good on the Blues. Good having a go.
You just have been that guy.
I was that guy. But I'm only saying it because I have my feelings in that. I think it's interesting in general, teams signing players 28, 29, 30 when clearly they need to be aiming younger, and I put Everton in that category. I just think it's a dangerous strategy to be bringing in a player around that age.
I think long term it's not a great deal. Short term, I think it's a brilliant deal. It gets everyone excited.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's what it is, and ultimately, as if Thiago wouldn't bring similar sorts of delight.
Exactly. Yeah, of course. I can't be that hypocrite. I can't be that guy.
No, fair play to the Blue Brethren. Thank you very much for joining us today, Liverpool fans. If we've still got any Everton fans listening after what we've just said, fair play to you for sticking along as well. Please make sure that you're giving us a subscribe on YouTube and leave some comments, nice comments. Don't call me an egg, please. And if you're listening to this on however you consume your podcasts, give it a little 5-star rating. Tell your friends, let everybody know how much you enjoy it. For now, then, we are the Liverpool.com podcast. I was Kristian Walsh, Joel Rabinowitz and Dan Morgan. All that's left to say is enjoy the start of the new season. Keep safe, and let's just hold on and hope the ride's an enjoyable one. Take care.